My friends, there comes a time in every person who recovers journey when the truth finally shines through the confusion. The moment you realize that the person who hurt you most is actually the one who was secretly afraid of your strength the whole time. People who are full of themselves will never tell you what they truly feel after damaging you, but their silence, their arrogance, their sudden withdrawal hides a mess they cannot manage. Today, I want to take you deep inside that secret world, into the feelings they pretend not to have, the fears they hide, and the truth they hope you never find out. Stick with me. This will change how you view everything. People full of themselves feel the loss of control long before they ever say it, and this feeling starts the moment you stop reacting the way they expect. At first, they tell themselves nothing has changed. They pretend your quietness doesn't bother them, your calm doesn't confuse them, your emotional distance doesn't shake them. But deep inside, something starts to fall apart. Because for them, control is not just something they like, it is the very foundation of who they are. Your reactions have always been proof that they mattered, that they had influence, that they could still control your feelings whenever they wanted. So when you step back, when you no longer get upset by their actions, when your replies become measured instead of dramatic, they feel the shift right away. They sense something slipping away, even if they won't name it. They start watching you more closely, trying to figure out why you are so calm now. They examine your voice, your breaks in speech, your distance, all while acting like they couldn't care less. But inside, they know something dangerous is happening. Their power is weakening, and they don't know how to stop it. That loss of being in charge of your emotions makes them nervous, annoyed, even panicked. They may lash out or act uncaring, but both reactions come from the same place, the fear that they no longer control you. And the truth is, it's not that they suddenly want to treat you better, it's that they cannot handle the idea of losing access to your emotional energy. They feel the loss of control as a threat to their self-importance, a sign that their usual ways are no longer working. And even though they will never say it out loud, it is in this quiet internal panic that the first signs of their breakdown begin to appear. And once that loss of control starts to settle in their mind, even if they won't recognize it, something deeper starts to happen, something linked to their second hidden truth, the one they protect with their whole being. Because the moment they sense they can no longer command your emotions like before, a quiet fear begins to grow inside them. It's the fear of your strength, the kind of strength that appears the moment you stop trying to prove your worth to someone who never valued it. People full of themselves may act superior, but the fact is that your inner power frightens them far more than they will ever admit. They rely on your emotional responses to feel important. And when you no longer bend or break under their pressure, they are forced to see something they never planned for, a version of you that doesn't need them at all. At first, they try to ignore it, telling themselves it's temporary, that you will eventually go back to the old ways. But every calm reaction, every boundary you set, every moment you choose your peace over their disorder, sends a message they cannot ignore. You are becoming stronger than their influence. And that strength breaks the very pattern they built their identity upon. They feel it like a danger, a warning that the power they once held is moving into your hands. Deep inside, they know that the person who starts to move away is the person who is waking up. And people full of themselves fear awakened people. They fear those who no longer react, who no longer chase, who no longer give up their well-being to soothe someone else's ego. Your strength shows their weakness, your clarity shows their confusion, and your growth shows their lack of emotional change. And even though they'll never say it, the truth is simple: your change affects them far more than their silence ever affected you. And as that fear of your growing strength settles in their chest, something else begins to happen, something quieter but far more telling. Because once a person full of themselves realizes they cannot control you and they cannot weaken the strength rising inside you, they hide behind something they believe will protect their self-importance: silence. But this silence is not confidence. and it is certainly not indifference. It is panic disguised as pride. On the surface, they may look calm, uncaring, or even victorious, acting as though your distance means nothing to them. But inside, that silence becomes a storm they cannot escape. They use silence the way a wounded animal hides in the shadows, hoping no one sees the pain beneath the surface. It is their last defense, the final mask they put on when they feel their power fading away. They believe that withdrawing, ignoring, or pretending they don't care will somehow give them the upper hand again, but all it really does is show how deeply your change has affected them. Because their silence is never peaceful. It is filled with tension, agitation, and fear of what your strength means for their decreasing influence. They replay your last words, your calm expression, the boundaries you set, trying to convince themselves that you are the weaker one for leaving. But the truth echoes louder than their pride can allow. They are losing someone they never thought would move past their manipulation. And that realization hurts them in a way they cannot talk about, because to admit it would mean recognizing the one truth they fear most, that you now hold the power they once claimed. So they hide behind silence, hoping it will shake you. But the irony is that their silence only reveals how shaken they truly are. And the longer they stay in that silence, the more another truth begins to appear within them. One they fight with every part of their being. Because once their prideful quietness fails to bring you back, once they realize you are not chasing, not begging, not giving in, something inside them starts to break. The temporary power they felt when they hurt you begins to disappear. And what comes next shows the emotional emptiness they've been trying to hide all along, hurting. You might have given them a brief rush, a short feeling of being superior, but when things calm down, they are left alone with the results of their own behavior, and that aftermath is where their inner world begins to fall apart. They try to distract themselves, trying to fill the silence with noise, people, attention, anything that stops them from facing the truth they've avoided their whole life. But no matter what they do, the emptiness returns stronger than before. It's the kind of emptiness that cannot be filled with praise or excuses, because deep down they know that the pain they caused you did not make them powerful. It revealed how powerless they truly are. Every moment of cruelty, every manipulation, every dismissal was an attempt to run away from their own emotional void, not a reflection of your worth. And now, without your reactions to feed their ego, that void becomes impossible to ignore. They feel it like a hollow echo inside their chest, reminding them that the temporary excitement of hurting someone is followed by a long, quiet collapse they cannot explain or fix. Their mind goes back and forth between blaming you, blaming themselves, and denying everything. Yet none of it silences the truth that keeps bothering them. They went too far. And now they are alone with the emptiness they hoped you would carry for them. In the end, the hurt they caused doesn't raise them up, it exposes them. That exposure, that internal collapse, is something they will never let the world see. And when that emptiness finally settles in, a heavy, uncomfortable truth they can no longer escape, it begins to uncover something even deeper, something they would rather bury than face. Because beneath all the boasting, beneath the arrogance, beneath the carefully built mask of superiority lies the fifth reality they desperately try to hide. Their self-importance is far more fragile than anyone ever realizes, and nothing frightens them more than the possibility of being forgotten. That fear grows louder the moment their temporary feeling of power melts away, leaving them with nothing but the echo of what they drove away. They start sensing your emotional withdrawal in ways they can't hide from themselves. The absence of your messages, your warmth, your care, it doesn't just bother them. It shakes something inside them that feels dangerously close to vulnerability. They begin to wonder if your silence means you've moved on, if your strength means you're healing, if your distance means you finally see your worth, and the thought of you realizing you deserve better than what they offered eats at their pride like a slow, constant burn. Because to a narcissist, being forgotten is the ultimate wound, the proof that their influence wasn't as lasting as they believed. So they cover that fear with denial, telling themselves you still care, you are still waiting, you still hurt for them. But every day you grow stronger, every boundary you rebuild, every step you take toward your own healing chips away at the illusion they created about themselves. Their fragile ego cannot handle the truth that someone they believed they owned emotionally has slipped out of their psychological grasp. And even though they would rather shatter than admit it, deep inside they know this. Losing someone like you doesn't just bruise their ego. It threatens the very identity they've crafted. And that fear, that desperate terror of being erased from your life, becomes the quiet punishment they can never escape. And once that fear of being forgotten starts eating away at them, it triggers something even more unexpected, something they work hard to keep buried. Because when a narcissist senses that their place in your life is fading, they start looking back at the past in a way they never did before. They start remembering the moments you stood beside them when no one else did. The times you offered understanding when they offered chaos, the nights you stayed awake trying to calm storms they created. And even though they will never admit it aloud, the sixth truth becomes unavoidable. They realize they cannot recreate the kind of loyalty, patience, and emotional depth you once gave them. They may try to convince themselves they can replace you quickly, that someone new will fill the space you left behind. But deep inside, they feel the difference immediately. They notice the absence of your compassion, the lack of your insight, the missing softness you carried so easily. They compare every new interaction to the emotional safe haven you once provided, and nothing measures up. They feel the emptiness of surface-level connections, the hollowness of shallow affection, and the tiredness of constantly trying to perform to keep others close. None of it gives them what your presence once offered naturally. This realization upsets them in ways they cannot express. They become annoyed without knowing why, restless without knowing what they're looking for, drawn to memories they claim not to care about. They remember your laughter, your support, your forgiveness, things they dismissed as weaknesses when they had them, but now those same qualities bother them as irreplaceable strengths. And the cruel irony for them is this: they only recognize the value of what you gave once it's gone. They only understand the rare quality of your heart when it no longer belongs to them. And that silent acknowledgement that they lost something they will never find again becomes a truth they choke on but never confess. And when the weight of those memories grows too heavy to ignore, when they finally realize they cannot recreate the loyalty, depth, or emotional safety you once offered, another truth emerges, one that cuts deeper than all the others. Because the moment a narcissist understands that what they lost cannot be replaced, they are forced into a confrontation they have spent their entire lives avoiding. The seventh reality begins to surface. Your absence forces them to face who they really are. For as long as you were there, your compassion smoothed their rough edges, your understanding masked their faults, your emotional work made their problems seem less severe. You balanced their chaos, took on their projections, and carried the weight of their insecurities without ever asking them to look at themselves. But once you step away, once your calming presence disappears, the mirror they avoided suddenly turns toward them. And for the first time, they see the emptiness, the anger, the fear, the unresolved wounds that have always been there, without you. To distract them from their own reflection, the truth becomes harder to silence. They begin noticing the patterns they blamed on others, the loneliness they insisted was freedom, the emotional void they disguised as independence. Their new relationships feel harder, their connections feel shallower, and their charm loses its power more quickly. The praise they chase never seems to land the same way because the one person who once made them feel important is no longer there to protect their insecurity. This internal confrontation terrifies them because narcissists build their entire identity on avoiding being held responsible. And suddenly, without your compassion to hide behind, they're left face to face with the version of themselves they worked hardest to deny. It's not sadness in the way healthy people feel it, it's fear. Fear of realizing that the pain they caused you was never just about you. It was a reflection of the brokenness they refused to fix. And now, with no one to distract them from the truth, that brokenness stands exposed, loud, and undeniable, leaving them without a shield, without a story, and without the illusion that kept their ego alive. And when that unfiltered reflection becomes too uncomfortable to bear, when they can no longer hide from the emptiness, the patterns, and the truth of who they've become, they instinctively reach for the same escape they've used all their lives: performance. This is where the eighth reality enters, closely linked to their collapse, because once they are forced to face themselves, they quickly try to create the illusion that they are perfectly fine, perfectly successful, perfectly unaffected. Their quick move to something new, their sudden happiness, their overly confident appearance, it is not healing. It is a performance designed to hide the emotional falling apart they can no longer control. They jump into an new relationship with amazing speed, not because they found love, but because they cannot survive in the silence created by your absence. They need noise, praise, admiration, anything that silences the truth screaming inside them. They need someone new, not to replace you, but to distract themselves from the reflection you left behind. And so they put on a mask of excitement, affection, and passion, hoping the world believes it, but more importantly, hoping they believe it. Yet beneath that shiny outward appearance lies deep instability. Their smiles feel forced. Their excitement feels frantic. Their charm feels rehearsed. They fake closeness rather than experience it. They make up joy rather than feel it. And the person they show off in public becomes a shield against their own inner chaos. They cannot admit that they feel alone. They cannot acknowledge that they are grieving something they never valued correctly. And so they hide the truth with exaggerated displays of moving on. But no matter how convincing their performance looks, it cannot silence the reality that follows them everywhere. They ruined the one connection that exposed their emptiness, stabilized their chaos, and reflected a better version of themselves. And instead of healing, they choose to run into new arms, new distractions, new illusions, hoping no one sees the truth they refuse to face. But even while they're performing this new version of themselves, smiling too much, moving on too fast, pretending they've changed into someone complete, another truth begins to appear beneath the act. Because no matter how convincing their performance is, no matter how many people they trick on the outside, they cannot escape what happens on the inside. And that brings us to the ninth reality. Narcissists never admit regret, not because they don't feel it, but because taking responsibility feels like death to their ego. As their performance wears thin, as the excitement of new attention fades, as the illusion of strength collapses under its own weight, they feel something they're terrified to acknowledge. It's that quiet pull in their chest, that uneasy awareness that they pushed away someone who genuinely cared, someone who saw them, someone who tried to understand them in ways they don't even understand themselves. But to admit regret would require them to accept responsibility, to recognize that their choices, not yours, led to the loss. And that is a truth they cannot bear. So instead, they rewrite the story. They convince themselves you were too emotional, too demanding, too sensitive, too hard to love. They create stories that protect their pride, even when deep down they know those stories couldn't be further from the truth. because acknowledging the real story, that they hurt someone who loved them and now feel the pain of losing them, would mean facing their deepest wound, the fear that they are the reason people leave. So they bury the regret beneath denial. They hide the ache with arrogance. They mask their sadness under defensiveness. And even though they feel the weight of what they lost, they will never offer an apology that reflects the truth. Not because you don't deserve it, but because their ego cannot survive it. Their silence becomes the shield that protects their pride, even as it shows their pain. And in that painful conflict, they remain trapped, unable to heal, unable to admit, unable to become the person they pretend to be. And it's in that trap, that space between their unspoken regret and their desperate need to protect their ego, that the final truth of this journey reveals itself. Because once they refuse to take responsibility, once they bury their sadness beneath layers of denial and pride, they step into the 10th reality, one they never ended to face but cannot escape. You become the lesson they never wanted but desperately needed. Not because you set out to teach them anything, but because the results of losing you carve a truth into their life that remains long after the relationship ends. They may never apologize, never admit wrongdoing, never acknowledge the depth of the pain they caused, but within them, something shifts. Every time they try to manipulate someone new, they feel the emptiness of the connection they ruined with you. Every time they try to recreate the bond they took for granted, they feel the hollowness of their own emotional limits. Every time they push someone away out of fear or insecurity, they feel the echo of losing you all over again. You become the quiet ghost in their memory, not haunting them, but reminding them of what genuine love looked like, what patience felt like, and what honesty required of them. And though they will never speak these truths, they carry them. You become the comparison they never admit to making, the standard they secretly measure others against, the reminder of the person they could have grown into but refused to. Your absence becomes the mirror life holds up to them, showing them what their pride caused, what their ego destroyed, and what their fear stopped them from becoming. In the end, you are not the wound, they are. You are the awakening. You are the turning point. You are the chapter they revisit in silence, trying to understand how they lost something so rare. And even though they'll never say it, never show it, never confess it, you remain the lesson their soul remembers, even when their ego denies it. And as you take in everything we've explored, I want you to understand something deeply, not just with your mind, but with your heart. The pain a person full of themselves caused you was never a reflection of your worth, your value, or your ability to love. It was a reflection of their limitations, their fears, and the emotional walls they were too fragile to break down. You were not broken because of them. You were broken open. And that opening is where your healing begins. What they tried to dim in you is the very light that will carry you forward, not just stronger, but wiser, softer in the right places, and firmer in the ones that protect your peace. Your journey is not about proving anything to the person who couldn't see your value. It's about finding the version of yourself that rises after the storm, the version that refuses to be defined by someone else's inability to love. And while they may keep running from their truth, hiding behind silence, ego, or distraction, you are stepping into a truth far more powerful, the truth of your own resilience. You are learning the emotional language they never understood, the courage they never developed, and the self-worth they never had. So let this be your reminder. You didn't lose when they walked away. You didn't lose when they chose pride over connection. You didn't lose when they failed to value your heart. They lost the moment you found clarity, the moment you took back your power, the moment you realized that love without respect is not love at all. Their chapter in your life may be over, but your story is just beginning. And the next part, the part where you rise, rebuild, and rediscover yourself, will be the most beautiful chapter yet. Stay with me until the end because your healing deserves to be seen.